Okay, what seemed different? Why did you think that that Gail was reading something wrong? What was different there?
2 glasses of wine.
Who said that? Was that Phil? There's nothing wrong with 2 glasses of wine with dinner. No. But Matthew and Mark, the one you've always heard, they have the one that you're used to is bread, then wine, and close it down, then do everything else. Most of your lives, you've heard that version of the story. Most of your lives, you've followed communion that way, where you take the bread, then you do the juice. That's how I'm going to say it later, because that's the tradition in the churches. But Luke has it, cup, then bread, then the party keeps going with another cup. So why the difference? Well, we're going to have a party for Bible nerds. That's what we're going to have. We're going to explain this difference for all the one Bible nerd in the house here. I mean, for me, it's like a good powder day, a good climbing day, and learning about biblical history from 2,000 years ago. And I'm just, the wind is up my skirt. I'm so excited about these things. So some of you know the New Testament was written in common Greek. That's what it all got written down in. But the people spoke Hebrew or Aramaic. Hebrew and Aramaic, the difference is like Spanish and Portuguese, where you can't tell the difference, but they sure can. So it's very different for them, but it looks a little similar. So people told the stories 2 different languages, wrote them down in a third, and then quickly, very quickly, because these stories were popular, they got translated into Latin, Syriac, other Greek dialects, all kinds of things. Okay, so even if you had the most attention and the most reverence, and you did the copying, they don't have copy machines back then. It's a long time. If you copied that, even if you thought God would strike you dead if you made one mistake with one letter, the very act of copying and translating guarantees some differences, especially the translating, guarantees differences. Just imagine if you're a church in, I don't know, 200 CE, and you have a Latin copy of Luke, because everyone there speaks Latin, really educated church. And then someone sends you like a Greek copy of Matthew, and you're reading that, and you notice a discrepancy between the two. Well, what do you do? Do you just go with they're different? Do you make another copy where you fix the discrepancy in the new one, or fix the discrepancy in the old one you had? Maybe the old one is really newer than the new one that you have is older. So it just gets really complicated, and whatever you choose has implications for the next person and the next person, and eventually how we read the Bible. And also, you're going to learn something today whether you want it or not. Here's another thing that gets complicated. The books of the Bible, when were they written? Paul was writing his letters mostly in the 50s and 60s. The Gospels were written from like the very end of the 60s until the 80s. Revelation was written probably like early 90s in there. People get so excited about these other books that were left out of the Bible as though it was some conspiracy theory. You know, if you read too much Dan Brown, your mind's going to rot into a rotten apple. But there were no other books of any value at that point that were used by churches in a widespread way. We have so many fragments of little, like, you know, you imagine you wrote a whole page and then you ripped off one line. We have a lot of that. And we have a lot of weird letters where kind of church people talk about some church things and then they go off on a tangent about something else. We have that, and we have a lot of books about Jesus that were written from about 120 to 800. That's way late, right? So this Bible, the Bible we have, is a collection of the New Testament, the oldest, the clearest, the most religious, and the most widespread used books around. Our Bible is the Bible for a good reason, even if Matthew and Luke disagree about how many cups of wine they drank. Okay, so what do we have when it comes to the Bible? We do not have any original copies of Luke. There's none out there. Can you imagine an auction if there was, like, Luke's handwriting was on the copy? It'd be like $11 billion for this one piece of paper. We don't have any copies of the copies. We don't have any copies of the copies of the copies. I have a Greek Bible in there that describes every copy we have and where it's dated to, from kind of the 300s to the 1200s, really. But the very earliest, the 2 earliest Greek copies of Luke we have are from the 4th century, about 300 years after Jesus died. They were written down. 300 years. It's a long time. They were probably written right when Rome finally said, okay, Christianity, you can do your thing. Because if you know your history, you weren't allowed to church. You had to do it in secret. And then all of a sudden, yay, you're allowed to be Christian. And then a couple of generations later, you have to be Christian or else you're in trouble. Big change. So around that time of a switch, Christians felt more confident that they could make copies of the Bible and share them. So a lot more came out there. So that's our oldest. And in those oldest 2 copies, it says cup, bread, cup, just like that. Most of the copies in the 5th and 6th century say cup, bread, cup. That's what your English Bibles say. However, if you're reading along at home or reading along in here and you see this passage, you'll see a footnote on there. How to read the Bible, hint number 20. Always read the footnotes. Always dig into the footnotes. Here's what's going on with this footnote. The 3rd oldest Greek copy of Luke, 5th century, it goes cup, bread, and then stops. 2.5 verses you have, it just skips. It's not there. It's interesting. More interesting, the very oldest copy of Luke is not in Greek. Our very oldest copy, in about 315 maybe, is in Syriac. It's translating from Greek, and it flips the order. It makes it more like Matthew and Mark. It says bread, then cup, and then it stops. So someone might have added an extra cup in like 330, maybe. Somebody might have decided for whatever reason in their church they needed to drink 2 glasses of wine to put up with each other. Something. Or it could be more complicated than that, because other copies in the 4th and 5th century translated in Latin and other kind of Greek dialects where they have just the cup, no bread, or just the bread and no cup. I mean, mind is just blown. I'm telling you, it's like a Dan Brown mystery, but it's written so much better. Okay, so that's all the Bible history you need for today. That's all you get. And here's why it matters, not just to me. Here's why that matters to you. Okay? The most sacred, you walk into any church, the most sacred things in that church are going to be the cross, it's going to be that Bible, and it's going to be sacraments right there. Now, every church has a different kind of cross, and we're okay with that. No one gets mad about a cross with Jesus, without Jesus, with that circle, without that circle. There's all kinds of crosses out there. But people fight about that a lot. And over history, people protect that table a lot. And they say, this is a table you have to be like this, or you're not allowed to be there. This is a table only for us, and we have to protect who us is. And yet, with that little bit of history, what we see is, as much as we might think that our understanding of God is so orthodox and never changes, as much as we might think there's no uncertainty, that is the inerrant Word of God, from the beginning, you get to know now that before you get to interpretation, before you get to context, before you get to ideology, it is complicated, even what letters belong on the page. It is complicated. It is complicated how our most sacred rituals are performed from the beginning, before we can ever argue about who gets it or what it means. That little footnote in a weird version of a familiar story, it tells me that God still breathes into our lives. God is still helping us grow and question and wonder. It tells me that different opinions about worship and about the holy are just fine. It tells me that we can get caught up in disagreements, but the closer we look at the essence of love, the heart of our faith, the closer we will be to some source from God. So regardless of the words that we have or the way that we do communion here, different than maybe churches you grew up with, regardless of the feelings we have when we come forward, I want to strip that away and say, just like at the base, what is this sacrament? What does the table mean? Why does it matter? And I have 2 answers for why it matters. First, why does it matter? Jesus said in that passage, "Do this in remembrance of me." So however you do it, communion is about remembering Jesus. This is not an altar. Some of you grew up in churches with an altar. Altars are for sacrificing. This is a memorial table for remembering. Most of my Presbyterian churches of my life, right in front, they're like etched into the wood, it would say, one of them said, "This, comma, do in remembrance of me." And the other said, "Do this in remembrance of me." However haughty you want your language. This is for us to remember and to be inspired and to be invigorated. This is so many of our tables are filled with messes and stresses. And this is a table for us to remember that Jesus prioritized peace and simplicity. And maybe we can too. This is a table for us to remember that Jesus held on to hope even in the moment where he knew he would be hanging on a cross so soon. This is a table for us to remember how to live for love, for the outcast, for our enemies, and even for ourselves. This is a table to remember that Jesus wanted nothing more than for you to be able to liberate your soul from its grief and its despair and its fear. That's why the table matters. Second, what does it mean? Communion in most Christian churches is a sacrament. Some churches have 2 sacraments, some have 7, some don't have any. Sacrament is just a fancy way to say this is a way to show what we know. Not just to speak it, not just to write it, not just to sing it, to show what we know is true about God. This is our chance to make an outward sign of an invisible inward truth, reality. This is our chance to do something very ordinary. We do it all the time, eat and drink. But it means something extraordinary, namely that God's love blows everywhere and settles on everyone. So we have no way to ever know how Jesus really said it, no matter if Matthew was closer or Luke was closer or Mark was closer, no matter how different churches have been doing communion for almost 2,000 years, no matter if Betsy just didn't make a good loaf this week. Sorry, that she put about. No matter if did you drop any pieces today, Jane, when you were cutting them up? Even if Jane dropped any pieces, it's still holy. No matter what you believe about whether it's bread or Jesus' body, when we get to the essence of communion, this is a practice of performing God's love by remembering how Jesus lived. Now, for some of you, that means you come to this table with dreams of how Jesus could heal you because he healed so many others. For some, you come to this table with celebration because when you think of Jesus, you think of joy. For some, you come here committed to transform the world toward justice because that infused everything that Jesus did. Some of you don't remember or think you know very much about Jesus, but you know that others get inspired. So maybe you can come here just looking for that inspiration and hope. Some of you just come up here because it's here, and even if it doesn't mean anything special to you, we thank you for contributing to this sense of reverence and atmosphere for everyone else. And even if you don't believe in God, coming here, God says, I believe in you. So the most powerful time that I ever took communion, it stands out, it's kind of unique. More than 20 years ago, I was a youth director doing everything I could not to be a pastor. I did everything I could not to be a pastor. But I really enjoyed hanging out with the teenagers and taking them on trips. So I went to Montreat with a group of kids, kind of this whole group of kids from around Arkansas at the time. And in the worship service, they invited any of the young people who were youth elders, so, sitting on their board of directors of their church. So come on up and you can help serve communion. And so the boy in my group that was a youth elder, he just beelined it right up there, all with his blue hair and his eyeshadow. This is 22 years ago. Blue hair and eyeshadow is nothing on a boy these days, but 22 years ago, that's a big deal, right? As if that wasn't controversial enough, he had a T-shirt of Johnny Cash. Now, it's a special T-shirt, and I bet Kathy's going to know which one. It's not just a regular Johnny. It's the one where the camera's kind of down here, and he's got the guitar over here, and his left hand is taking up the whole screen, and the most of this hand is just that middle finger pointing out. So he's standing on stage. Imagine right here, standing on stage with that picture as hundreds of kids come up to take communion. Now, was that irreverent? Yeah, it kind of was. If Jane wanted to wear that shirt up here next month when we do communion, I'd laugh, but I'd hope you wouldn't. But at that moment, that boy was so honored to be part of something sacred. When teenagers get pushed away from power, he felt empowered. He felt trusted. He felt part of a church in a way he'd never been before. He felt validated for his faith and his questions. And so he wore that, I'm sure he didn't even think of that goofy shirt, but he stood there, he held the bread with as much sincerity as I've ever seen anyone, any deacon, any elder, any pastor, any priest, hold that bread. And I looked in his eye-shadowed eyes, and he said, this is the body of Christ broken for you. And it floored me, because I knew this was hallowed ground. No matter what was surrounding it, this was hallowed ground, because he knew there was something true about what we were doing. He knew there was something powerful and holy, even if none of us could have put words to it. In a world so full of unkept promises and hidden agendas, and there's so much anger and misery and judgment and loneliness, all of a sudden there was an inbreaking of grace. And when you feel something like that, pay attention. When you can remember those moments, hold on to that. Now, some of you have been in churches where that grace comes to you, literally, like the bread gets passed down pews. We don't have pews. A little hard to do that here. It's great symbolism when God's grace comes to you. It's also great symbolism when you come to God's grace, right? That can feel very personal when you make the effort to step toward these tables. It might feel like a Taco Bell drive-thru if you're just kind of walking through, right? It's a whole bunch of us waiting to do that. But however we do this ritual, whatever you think about this sacrament, hopefully this inbreaking of grace can spark a deeper relationship between you and the Spirit of God. Now, before we do it, the choir is going to come invite us to communion with a song. And then the deacons are going to be over there holding on to a cup, able to, and the bread to pray for you, short prayer. Or you can come over here and just between you and God and grab the juice and the bread. This side has the gluten-free crackers. If you're home alone or with someone at your house, however you want to remember, like that bagel and that coffee, just tap them to your lips and let that be a memory for you. But all of us are invited to this table to remember. Amen.